So, is it human, or is it an alien, or is it a monkey? There are two of these. One was living when captured. The other one was deceased when found. You tell me if this is a human or otherwise. That's not a human. That is not a human in any shape or form. This never was a human. This is 6 inches tall. The one in Russia was a little taller. This is assumed by Dr. Greer to be a 6 to 8 year old thing. And the one in Russia is assumed to be an adult. And it is several inches larger, but still under a foot. So this video is mainly composed of Dr. Stephen Greer talking about this Atacama Humanoid. Thanks for watching.
It turns out there's not just one of these, but there are at least two. And I just got a report from Chile last night that multiple of these small creatures have been seen live and living in these foothills of the Andes in the Atacama region. The Atacama skeleton was found in this area of Chile. It is about 6 inches. I found it first saw it, I should say, in 2009. I didn't discover it, nor did I take it out of Chile, regardless of what the New York Times has been alleging. In reality, a treasure hunter found it in an old ruins of an Indian village in the foothills of the Atacama region in this area of Chile. Now, this is an area that the native peoples had reported seeing small people, which they call the Gentiles. It's an interesting term they use for them, for centuries and perhaps millennia. And it had also been associated with seeing UFOs. It was actually taken in the area right over where this Atacama skeleton was found. And there are very unusual objects that are seen going in and out of the Andes that are luminous, partially materialized objects, sometimes fully materialized. And the report I received last night from a researcher who I have credit this photograph and a lot of this information to, Alex Humanoid, thank you, is that there are reports of these being seen recently by people in that area as living organisms. And the one that I want to show you next, this is the one that is in the possession of a man in Barcelona. And he was a man who went to Chile, met the treasure hunter who had been sifting through these old ruins from the late 1800s, early 1900s in mining towns, looking for treasures, basically, old artifacts. And in a pouch, in one of them, someone had preserved and saved this. Now, I first learned of this in 2009. It was found in 2003. And the public knew some of the information on it beginning in 2004 and 5. Some studies were done in Europe showing that it was in fact not human. The anthropologists had found that there was wear on some of the connective tissue still remaining on the feet, that it had walked around, et cetera, and so on. However, no thorough genetic testing had been done, because to do the genetic testing requires damaging this very unusual skeleton. I was invited first just to view it. And when I first saw it, I put it in my hand, and I have big hands. Size 9 surgical gloves. Anyway, and it was 6 inches. It did not take up my whole hand. And I looked at this, and I knew immediately that this was not a model or a fake or what have you. I knew that this was an actual, had been a living organism. And so we examined it, looked at it, photographed it, made a connection with Ramon in Barcelona, who owned it, and we kept the dialogue going. In 2012, I was able to convince him to allow us to come over with a technical and sort of surgical team and take samples of the bone and be able to get bone marrow that could then be extracted and run through some genetic tests to see if it matches or didn't match to any known species on Earth. Now, during that time, we got a bunch of x-rays and CAT scans, and you'll see that it has a very different appearance to a fetus or a newborn baby. And if you look carefully at this, you'll also see that on a newborn and a fetus, the bones are very, very thin, they're rubbery. This is the knee on the Atacama Humanoid. We'll get into this. And what you'll also find is that the skull has 4 bones, and we have 6. The Atacama has 10, we have 12, etc. It's grossly, obviously different from a human. Now, the question was, then what is it? For the record, I have never stated it is of extraterrestrial origin. We do not know what this is. But the hatchet job done at Stanford and UCSF and Genome Research magazine, which is atrocious on this study, is going to get exposed very quickly. And this is me holding up the skeleton. And when you see it, look at the extent of the calcification and how opaque it is. The amount of calcium in those bones is consistent with a small child, because when you're in utero, there is not much calcium in those bones. They're very cartilaginous, meaning like cartilage. This is why newborn babies, I'm a trauma doctor, when there's a terrible accident, they're amazing. They're like Gumby bears. They can move and do this, and they don't have a broken bone. Why? Because they don't have a high degree of calcification, which you have as you get older. And there are a lot of technical reasons for this, having to do with osteoblasts and things that will put the general audience to sleep. I will not go into. But it's important to note that. And the very first thing, the radiologist in Barcelona, when we pulled this off the x-ray machine and out of the CAT scanner, they all went, oh, my God, this is not a fetus. They had assumed this little thing had to be an ejected or aborted fetus, 22 weeks, 28 weeks. They said, this was a child, and it was up running around. It had epiphyseal plates. What are epiphyseal plates? Epiphyseal plates are in where the long bones, and you will see that there's a place, what's called a growth plate. And you know, when you're growing, the bones have to grow because there's a growth plate in the long bones that allows them to continue to grow and lay down new bone and get longer and longer as we get taller and taller as we reach our full mature height. Those epiphyseal plates are consistent with a 6 to 8 year old human child in terms of developmental stage. There is another one. Look at the skull and look at the overlapping helmet-like feature. If you look at the skull sutures and the way a large skull bone comes over to like a point and overlaps, it's identical to the Atacama skeleton. This is from Russia from 1996. A separate small being that was found running around that a woman captured, unfortunately kept it in captivity, tried to feed it yogurt. It died and was subsequently autopsied. I understand that it was later confiscated by some authorities after initial tests had been done. It's bigger. This is an adult. The skull is the same essentially as the Atacama. Now, what's important about that is that If there are two of these, it rules out a singular genetic mutation of a human embryo. There's no way. It isn't going to happen. Be 1 in a quadrillion chances. Interestingly, it was the assistant of Dr. Gary Nolan at Stanford who had offered to do an honest examination of this genetically, who found this Russian being, and then I had another researcher send it to me. And I recalled that in 1996, when I was over in England, I was told about this, but by the time I wanted to go over to Russia to get it, it had been seized and it had vanished. We do not know where it is now. I hear different stories of where it is. One account is that it was buried on the shore of the Black Sea, another is that it's in the KGB's or FSB's hands. We do not know. It's not available for examination, which means all we have are these images. Now, this means that with two of them, we really have a phenomenon of something that is a creature, that is a humanoid or human-like creature, not described in the medical literature, not described in the scientific literature anywhere. And so this became even more of a mystery. I will let you just peruse this. This is from Dr. Ralph Lockman. Now he is sort of the world's expert on skeletal abnormalities in children, and actually literally wrote the textbook. And he reviewed all the x-rays and all the CAT scans, and he came to the conclusion it was a 6 to 8 year old child, that the chances that it was progeria, which is a type of genetic condition where you age your bones rapidly and could be, younger than that, is extremely small. And he had never seen anything like this. And this from the man at both UCLA and Stanford, who is the professor who is the world's expert on skeletal dysplasias, abnormalities in the skeleton in children. And it matched no genetic syndrome. So by this point, and this was in the fall of 2012, we knew we had something significant.
Example of an extraterrestrial genome.